want to do what? You want to strip back to the brick so you can insulate? Well, you must be joking. And what about space? We'll be squashed. We won't even be able to walk around the bed. And will the door even open? Well, if that's what you're thinking about internal wall insulation, I know just how you feel. We did the whole house minus the bedroom to give us a retreat. So when it came to getting it done, I just wasn't looking forward to it at all. So what is the big issue? Why do we all dread it so much? And really, do we have to go back to the brick? And if so, why? Well, I'm sorry to say it's always better to go back to basics. There's two main reasons. First of all, you need to check the walls in good shape. After all, you'll want the insulation to last a good length of time, so it makes no sense to risk putting it on a wall with problems. And then secondly, there's the plaster. In a house built after 1940, the plaster will be made of gypsum, which typically lasts from 25 to 30 years, so you need to check what state it's in. If there's any damage or the plaster's broken down, then it's much better to remove it and start with a thin skim under the insulation to give you a smooth surface. Problem plasters are generally to do with moisture, either coming through from damage to the external wall or from condensation within the room. Moisture from either side will affect the ability of the plaster to stick to the wall, so that's why you start getting bubbles and peeling. It is possible to repair the bubbles, but pointless unless you've addressed the reasons for the moisture. If it's coming through the wall, then taking the plaster off gives you the opportunity to find out what's going on. It may be damaged brick or pointing that's not in good shape, and that's allowing moisture to get into the wall. So you've got to repair that before you do anything in terms of insulation. And remember to leave time for it to dry out first. If you've got a lot of condensation in the room, then insulation might be a good move long term. Warm air can hold so much moisture, but as soon as it hits a cold surface, it cools down and drops some of the moisture. So making the surfaces in the room warm will help. However, it's not enough on its own. You've also got to improve your ventilation. I'll put a link to another video about that above. Whatever the issue, making good is important, because if moisture continues to come in, it will eventually degrade your insulation and leave you back where you started. Now, if you've got an old house built before 1940, the same issues apply. You've just got to add in breathability. A breathable house is one where all the materials used are vapour permeable or vapour open. Before 1930, all houses were built this way. It means that water vapour's constantly moving through the walls of the house from inside and outside. This is passive movement, nothing's making it happen, it just moves naturally, but the net effect is that the house stays dry. And it's clearly working. Look how many Victorian houses are still providing family homes. The important bit to understand is that once breathable, always breathable. If you put a non-breathable layer onto the wall, you stop the air moving, which means it's going to drop that moisture as condensation. This is called interstitial condensation. It's condensation within the walls, and it means you'll get damage to the brick, the insulation, and or the plaster. If you want to know more about breathability, I'll put a link to another video above, and that'll give you more depth. So why is this relevant to taking the plaster off the wall? Well, it's particularly relevant in a breathable home because in bygone days the plaster of choice was lime. If you still have the original plaster, it's going to be very old, so make sure to check it out thoroughly. If it's in really good condition, then you can put the insulation on the top. It'll all be breathable and the vapour can keep moving. However, if you've any doubts as to the state of the plaster, then best to get rid of it and start again, either with a skim of lime or a breathable thermal plaster, something like diathanite. If it's already been replaced, it's probably been done with gypsum plaster, which isn't vapour permeable, because not many builders understand the breathability issue, in which case covering that plaster with insulation will be storing up problems, so much better to get rid. The final piece in the breathability issue is that even if you still have your lime plaster, it's going to have been painted or wallpapered over, and the vast majority of paint and wallpaper is non-breathable, so it invites condensation. Honestly, you'd only have breathable paint or paper if you knew all about this and you went looking for it specially. The rest of us will have just gone to the standard providers thinking about colour and design, not realising we were creating problems in the future. Now, once you have the plaster issue sorted, then you need to think about what insulation you're going to use. Start by checking the U value. That's the measure of how much heat can pass through a material. It's measured in watts per metre squared Kelvin. Now, don't ask me what that means. If you want to know, go and look it up. The simpler answer is you just want the lower the better. Then you need to think about the material the insulation's made of. The most commonly used insulation material these days is PIR. The upside is that it's very efficient, it's easy to get hold of, you just need to pop down the local builder's yard, and builders are very familiar with it and will mostly default to using that whether you want it or not. Problem is it's not breathable and it will cause problems in an old house, so speak to your builder if this is what they're suggesting and stick to your guns because they won't be familiar with the problems. It's also made from petrochemicals, so not great for the environment. Another version is a spray foam. Now, if you're considering this, please do your research very thoroughly and don't just accept what you're being told. Some insurance companies won't cover buildings with it in, and it's almost impossible to remove. It also is terrible for condensation. We went for sustainable materials, of course, because our house was built in 1901. We chose wood fibre bats for our wall and under the suspended floor. We've used both flexible and rigid wood fibre in different rooms and it's worked really well. Upsides, the flexible version is easy to fit into the space. If you cut it slightly big, then you can shove it in and you reduce any chance of uncontrolled air coming through. A rigid wood fibre bat has the added advantage that it can be plastered on, so you don't need to put an additional wood fibre version of plasterboard on as well. Both have a good low U value, so very efficient, and it's all made from the fibres and scraps left when everything else from the tree has been used. The downside is it is a bit more expensive, plus it needs to be ordered in advance at the moment, so you may need somewhere to store it. But that's just what we use. There are loads of options to choose from, so I'll put a video here to tell you about other forms of sustainable insulation, and if you want to find out more about retrofit overall, look at this video. And if you've got any questions, please just let me know.